Chapter 2. Religion Kills. His aversion to religion, in the sense usually attached to the term, was of the same kind with that of Lucretius. He regarded it with the feelings due not to a mere mental delusion, but to a great moral evil. He looked upon it as the greatest enemy of morality, first by setting up factitious excellencies, belief in creeds, devotional feelings and ceremonies, not connected with the good of humankind, and causing these to be accepted as substitutes for genuine virtue, but above all by radically vitiating the standard of morals, making it consist in doing the will of a being on whom it lavishes indeed all the phrases of adulation, but whom in sober truth it depicts as eminently hateful. John Stuart Mill, on his father, in the Autobiography. Tantum religio poduit suadere malorum. To such heights of evil are men driven by religion. Lucretius, De Rerum Natura. Imagine that you can perform a feat of which I am incapable. Imagine, in other words, that you can picture an infinitely benign and all-powerful Creator, who conceived of you, then made and shaped you, brought you into the world he had made for you, and now supervises and cares for you even while you sleep. Imagine further that if you obey the rules and commandments that he has lovingly prescribed, you will qualify for an eternity of bliss and repose. I do not say that I envy you this belief, because to me it seems like the wish for a horrible form of benevolent and unalterable dictatorship, but I do have a sincere question. Why does such a belief not make its adherents happy? It must seem to them that they have come into possession of a marvellous secret, of the sort that they could cling to in moments of even the most extreme adversity. Superficially, it does sometimes seem as if this is the case. I have been to evangelical services in black and in white communities, where the whole event was one long whoop of exultation at being saved, loved, and so forth. Many services, in all denominations and among almost all pagans, are exactly designed to evoke celebration and communal fiesta, which is precisely why I suspect them. There are more restrained and sober and elegant moments also. When I was a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, I could feel, even if I could not believe, the joyous words that are exchanged between believers on Easter morning. Christos anesti, Christ is risen. Alethos anesti, he is risen indeed. I was a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, I might add, for a reason that explains why very many people profess an outward allegiance. I joined it to please my Greek parents-in-law. The archbishop who received me into his communion on the same day that he officiated at my wedding, thereby trousering 2 fees instead of the usual 1, later became an enthusiastic cheerleader and fundraiser for his fellow Orthodox Serbian mass murderers, Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic, who filled countless mass graves all over Bosnia. The next time I got married, which was by a Reformed Jewish rabbi with an Einsteinian and Shakespearean bent, I had something a little more in common with the officiating person. But even he was aware that his lifelong homosexuality was, in principle, condemned as a capital offence, punishable, by the founders of his religion, by stoning. As to the Anglican Church into which I was originally baptized, it may look like a pathetic, bleating sheep today, but as the descendant of a church that's always enjoyed a state subsidy and an intimate relationship with hereditary monarchy, it has a historic responsibility for the Crusades, for persecution of Catholics, Jews, and dissenters, and for combat against science and reason. The level of intensity fluctuates according to time and place, but it can be stated as a truth that religion is not, and in the long run cannot be, content with its own marvellous claims and sublime assurances. It must seek to interfere with the lives of non-believers, or heretics, or adherents of other faiths. It may speak about the bliss of the next world, but it wants power in this one. This is only to be expected. It is, after all, wholly man-made, and it does not have the confidence in its own various preachings, even to allow coexistence between different faiths. Take a single example from one of the most revered figures that modern religion has produced. In 1996, the Irish Republic held a referendum on one question: whether its state constitution should still prohibit divorce. Most of the political parties in an increasingly secular country urged voters to approve of a change in the law. They did so for 2 excellent reasons. It was no longer thought right that the Roman Catholic Church should legislate its morality for all citizens, and it was obviously impossible even to hope for eventual Irish reunification if the large Protestant minority in the north was continually repelled by the possibility of clerical rule. Mother Teresa flew all the way from Calcutta to help campaign, along with the Church and its hardliners, for a no vote. In other words, an Irish woman married to a wife-beating and incestuous drunk should never expect anything better, and might endanger her soul if she begged for a fresh start, while, as for the Protestants, they could either choose the blessings of Rome or stay out altogether. There was not even the suggestion that Catholics could follow their own church's commandments while not imposing them on all other citizens. And this in the British Isles in the last decade of the 20th century. The referendum eventually amended the constitution, though by the narrowest of majorities. Mother Teresa in the same year gave an interview saying that she hoped her friend, Princess Diana, would be happier after she had escaped from what was an obviously miserable marriage. But it's less of a surprise to find the Church applying sterner laws to the poor or offering indulgences to the rich. A week before the events of September the 11th, 2001, I was on a panel with Dennis Prager, who is one of America's better-known religious broadcasters. He challenged me in public to answer what he called a straight yes-no question, and I happily agreed. Very well, he said. I was to imagine myself in a strange city as the evening was coming on. Toward me I was to imagine that I saw a large group of men approaching. Now, would I feel safer or less safe if I was to learn that they were just coming from a prayer meeting? As the reader will see, this is not a question to which a yes-no answer can be given, but I was able to answer it as if it were not hypothetical. Just to stay within the letter B, I have actually had that experience in Belfast, Beirut, Bombay, Belgrade, Bethlehem, and Baghdad. In each case I can say absolutely, and can give my reasons, why I would feel immediately threatened if I thought that the group of men approaching me in the dusk were coming from a religious observance. Here, then, is a very brief summary of the religiously inspired cruelty I witnessed in these 6 places. In Belfast, I have seen whole streets burned out by sectarian warfare between different sects of Christianity, and interviewed people whose relatives and friends have been kidnapped and killed or tortured by rival religious death squads, often for no other reason than membership of another confession. There is an old Belfast joke about the man stopped at a roadblock and asked his religion. When he replies that he is an atheist, he is asked, Protestant or Catholic atheist? I think this shows how the obsession has rotted even the legendary local sense of humour. In any case, this actually did happen to a friend of mine, and the experience was decidedly not an amusing one. The ostensible pretext for this mayhem is rival nationalisms, but the street language used by opposing rival tribes consists of terms insulting to the other confessions, prods and tags. For many years the Protestant establishment wanted Catholics to be both segregated and suppressed. Indeed, in the days when the Ulster State was founded, its slogan was, a Protestant Parliament for a Protestant people. Sectarianism is conveniently self-generating and can always be counted upon to evoke a reciprocal sectarianism. On the main point, the Catholic leadership was in agreement. It desired clerical-dominated schools and segregated neighbourhoods, the better to exert its control. So, in the name of God, the old hatreds were drilled into new generations of schoolchildren, and are still being drilled. Even the word drill makes me queasy. A power tool of that kind was often used to destroy the kneecaps of those who fell foul of the religious gangs. When I first saw Beirut in the summer of 1975, it was still recognizable as the Paris of the Orient. Yet this apparent Eden was infested with a wide selection of serpents. It suffered from a positive surplus of religions, all of them accommodated by a sectarian state constitution. The president by law had to be a Christian, usually a Maronite Catholic, the Speaker of the Parliament a Muslim, and so on. This never worked well because it institutionalized differences of belief as well as of caste and ethnicity. The Shia Muslims were at the bottom of the social scale, the Kurds were disenfranchised altogether. The main Christian party was actually a Catholic militia called the Phalange, or Phalanx, and had been founded by a Maronite Lebanese named Pierre Gemayel, who had been very impressed by his visit to Hitler's Berlin Olympics in 1936. It was later to achieve international notoriety by conducting the massacre of Palestinians at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps in 1982, while acting under the orders of General Sharon. That a Jewish general should collaborate with a fascist party might seem grotesque enough, but they had a common Muslim enemy, and that was enough. Israel's eruption into Lebanon that year also gave an impetus to the birth of Hezbollah, the modestly named Party of God, which mobilized the Shia underclass and gradually placed it under the leadership of the theocratic dictatorship in Iran that had come to power 3 years previously. It was in lovely Lebanon, too, having learned to share the kidnapping business with the ranks of organized crime, that the faithful moved on to introduce us to the beauties of suicide bombing. I can still see that severed head in the road outside the near-shattered French embassy. On the whole, I tended to cross the street when the prayer meetings broke up. Bombay also used to be considered a pearl of the Orient, with its necklace of lights along the Corniche and its magnificent British Raj architecture. It was one of India's most diverse and plural cities, and its many layers of texture have been cleverly explored by Salman Rushdie, especially in The Moor's Last Sigh and in the films of Mira Nair. It is true that there had been intercommunal fighting there during the time in 1947-48 when the grand historic movement for Indian self-government was being ruined by Muslim demands for a separate state and by the fact that the Congress Party was led by a pious Hindu. But probably as many people took refuge in Bombay during that moment of religious bloodlust as were driven or fled from it, a form of cultural coexistence resumed, as often happens when cities are exposed to the sea and to influences from outside. Parsis, former Zoroastrians who had been persecuted in Persia, were a prominent minority, and the city was also host to a historically significant community of Jews. But this was not enough to content Mr. Bal Thackeray and his Shiv Sena Hindu nationalist movement, who in the 1990s decided that Bombay should be run by and for his co-religionists, and who loosed a tide of goons and thugs onto the streets. Just to show he could do it, he ordered the city renamed as Mumbai, which is partly why I included it in this list under its traditional title. Belgrade had until the 1980s been the capital of Yugoslavia, or the land of the southern Slavs, which meant by definition that it was the capital of a multi-ethnic and multi-confessional state. But a secular Croatian intellectual once gave me a warning that, as in Belfast, took the form of a sour joke. If I tell people that I'm an atheist and a Croat, he said, people ask me how I can prove I'm not a Serb. To be Croatian, in other words, is to be Roman Catholic. To be a Serb is to be Christian Orthodox. In the 1940s, this meant a Nazi puppet state, set up in Croatia and enjoying the patronage of the Vatican, which naturally sought to exterminate all the Jews in the region, but also undertook a campaign of forcible conversion directed at the other Christian community. Tens of thousands of Orthodox Christians were either slaughtered or deported in consequence, and a vast concentration camp was set up near the town of Jasenovac. So disgusting was the regime of General Ante Pavelic and his Ustasha party that even many German officers protested at having to be associated with it.